And when I have these conversations with people as to how we can make this time of year a little bit better in their own brains, they're like, well, I don't know how to stop having those feelings. I don't know how to stop thinking that way. I don't know how to stop being triggered. Welcome to the Love Your Brain podcast, the podcast designed for everyday people who are ready to hop off the negative thought hamster wheel and enjoy a less hostile environment in their own brains. Our brains are where we live our entire lives, and I'm on a mission to help people see that they have everything they need to make it a happier place to be. So join us for this episode of the Love Your Brain podcast. Let's get started. All right, welcome back to the Love Your Brain podcast. Today's episode, we are going to be focusing on some of those challenging relationships with women in our life. It is around Mother's Day. By the time this comes out, Mother's Day will likely have passed for most of you that are in the US. But I think this is a really good time of year to unpack some of the baggage that might be behind some of our negative feelings about some of the women in our lives. And the reason I say that is because when these holidays come up, they can trigger pretty intense emotions. And the harder we try to really push them away, the more intense they tend to pop back up, right? So today I would like to work with you a little bit on seeing if we can find a different way to feel about some of these women in our lives. And I think it'll be a good one. But let's start by just thinking about the idea of feelings. Feelings all are born out of thoughts. Our thoughts create our emotions and how we experience life. So if we come at it from that perspective, I think it's easier to get to the root of where we can change some of these things. And a fun little exercise we can try is experimenting with how different thoughts feel in our body. So I would encourage you, try and just close your eyes for a little bit. If you're driving, obviously don't close your eyes, but if you're sitting somewhere or walking somewhere, maybe just take a seat. Take a moment to close your eyes. Just take a few deep breaths, kind of settle into your body. And I want you to think about something that you love, something that you're obsessed with. Maybe it's a pet you have, an animal or a cat or a bird, or maybe it's a person that you absolutely adore. Or it could be just an object. Maybe it's something that you look at and it just brings so much love into your heart. Whatever it is, I want you to think about that thing or that person or that animal and just think about them. Think about all the things that you love about them. And I want you to pay attention to how that feels in your body. What are the sensations that you're experiencing in your body? Really feel into that and recognize, oh, well, I'm feeling this sensation in my hands or in my chest or in my throat or in my heart. What are the different feelings, the actual physical feelings that you're having in your body when you think about that thing that you love? Okay, we're going to take a breather for a second. And now I want you to do that same exercise, but think about maybe that person in your life, be it a mother figure or a sister or an aunt. We're just saying women today for the sake of it being Mother's Day, but it could really be anyone. I want you to think about that person. Think about maybe some of the things that kind of bother you about them. What is that feeling like in your body today? What are the sensations that you're having in your body related to that person? Maybe it's discomfort, maybe it's tension, maybe it's heaviness, maybe it's an anxious feeling, maybe it causes your heart to feel like it's beating faster, maybe it's a tightness. What are the feelings that you're having when you're thinking about that person? All right, shake it off. Shake it off a little bit. I want you to see the vast difference of how you feel in your body when you're thinking about that person or thing that you love versus when you're thinking or feeling about the person that you are not a big fan of. All I want you to recognize today is that those feelings are likely on two ends of a continuum. Things that we love usually are on one end of just like all of these great positive things. And on the other opposite end might be things that we really dislike, that we have negative feelings about, that trigger us likely, all of those different things. So those are two opposite ends. And in the very center is a beautiful space of neutrality. It's that space where you don't feel positive or negative. It is what it is. You don't necessarily have strong feelings either way. And what I hope with today's episode is that we can get you to a place maybe where you feel a little bit closer to neutrality. Not necessarily that you're going to go from really disliking someone to absolutely adoring them, but that you get a little bit closer, that you close that gap between you and your feelings towards that person on one end and scooch you a little tiny bit closer to feeling neutral about that person. Because the truth is, when we come to a place of feeling neutral towards things, it's very freeing. And that's what I want you to experience. Is not necessarily that you have another person in your life that you think is the best thing since sliced bread, but that you at least feel free from the negative emotions. So, one of the ways I like to do this is by getting you closer to a place of understanding. And I want to preface this by saying we are not going to be justifying anyone's negative behavior in any way, shape, or form. But I do think it's important to get to a place where you have understanding of where their behavior came from, whether that's real and factual, like whether or not you have the full story, or whether you are imagining what that story might be. Because think about it. When you have a toddler, for example, a small child, and they are throwing a fit. They're losing control of themselves. They're probably driving you crazy. Maybe they're throwing a tantrum. Hopefully, your first inclination is not just to villainize that child, right? Hopefully, your first inclination is to go, wait a second, did they have a nap? Have they had a snack recently? What's happening? What has gotten them to this place where they're throwing this tantrum? And that is a thought process that we have about children a lot of the time, but we don't necessarily have that with adults. And there's a lot of reasons why. But I think it is a really helpful thought process to go through in any situation where we are encountering someone who's behaving in a way that's not our favorite, to get to that place of understanding. Now, again, a lot of the time, you aren't going to have a full factual story of how this person got to be the way that they are, but you can imagine. And I always used to tell my kids when they were little, if they were at school and some kid said something terrible to them, maybe they said, you're so stupid, or maybe they hurt them in some way. Maybe they came up to them and, punched them in the arm or whatever it is. The first step was to go, wow, that sounds like it really hurt you. I wonder how they got to a place where they felt like that was a behavior that was okay to have, right? Because usually when we can get ourselves to a place where we can understand that, it takes away a lot of the power of the negative feelings that we're having thinking about this person. And that's one of the joys of having a parent that's a social worker and a life coach, is they probably have these conversations that are kind of ridiculous to other people. But just trying to help my kids understand, like, what is the history that got them to a place where they thought this behavior was okay? And usually it would get them to a place where they're like, wow, they must be experiencing X, Y, or Z that's really negative, that's causing them to behave this way. And it doesn't make it okay, it doesn't excuse it, but it gives you an understanding. I think this can be really helpful, as we're talking about Mother's Day. You may have a mother or a sister or an aunt or a mother-in-law that has hurt you in some way. And maybe they've hurt you because of the things that they've said or the things that they've done. Maybe it's because of what they haven't done or the ways that they didn't show up for you that you really felt like you needed from them. Those are completely valid feelings to have. The problem comes in when that feeling becomes a belief that's happening in your brain over time, and it can be uncomfortable. So on holidays like these, it can really bring to the surface feelings that don't feel good to us, right? Those feelings of reminders of that pain, or we start to feel angry or resentful or bitter. And none of those are things that are fun to experience. And when I have these conversations with people as to how we can make this time of year a little bit better in their own brains, they're like, well, I don't know how to stop having those feelings. I don't know how to stop thinking that way. I don't know how to stop being triggered. And that's the key right there is you don't have to stop doing those things, right? That's what we've been learning about neural pathways is that it's not about rejecting one thought process. It's about creating a new one. It's really important for us to actually divert our energy towards creating that new thought process because if not, what's going to happen is our brains love efficiency. They're going to see that path of that negative thought process about that person and they're going to jump on that path every time because it looks like a well-worn trail. You've gone over it multiple times. You've had experiences that confirmed that thought process. And so your brain's like, oh, that looks like an easy path. Let's go down it. So it's going to continue that thought process over and over and over again until we divert our energy to creating a new thought process, a new neural pathway. And eventually our brains will go, oh, that looks like an easy path to go down and choose that one instead. So how are we going to do that? Remember, I talked about getting closer to neutral by having understanding. I think a big part of this is kind of doing similar to what we do with toddlers, is unpacking whether or not we have the facts or not. What could be the story behind what got this person to where they are? Maybe you're someone you don't have a good relationship with your mother-in-law. Maybe you're someone who feels like your mother-in-law is super critical. They say things to you that are hurtful. What could be the story that got them to a place where they felt the need to be critical? There could be a lot of explanations for that. Maybe they had an experience where someone was very critical towards them and they saw that modeled. So to them, that became the right response. That's the only response. That was the neural pathway that was created for them was when you're in this role, this is how you act. So that's the way that they're acting because that's what's familiar to them. That's what their brain is saying is the most efficient path. There are a lot of explanations as to what could have happened. If you can spend some time really building a story, a bridge is what I like to call it, a bridge from who they are today to maybe where they were before and the things that they experienced along the way, it can allow us to have some understanding that can get us a little bit closer to feeling neutral towards that person. So, one of the most empowering thought processes that I have used in the past when I'm going through this exercise is to create a situation where my thought process is, oh, that makes sense. Oh, that makes sense that they would respond that way because I've already thought about what they may have experienced in the past that got them to behave in the way that they're behaving today. Oh, that makes sense. They were really hurt before. Maybe, they didn't have positive female figures to look up to. Maybe they were really negative relationships. So, oh, that makes sense why they're that way. And that for me brings me back to neutrality. It's not saying what they're doing is okay, but it allows my brain to have this new path of understanding like, okay, that makes sense why they're acting that way. And it takes away the personalization that I'm applying to it. Because a lot of times when pain is coming out of these interactions, it's because we're assigning meaning to it. If that person is being mean to me, it's because it means something about me, which it often doesn't, right? It's coming from whatever experience that person had, much more so than it does have anything to do with who I am. So it really removes the personalization in a way where I'm understanding that their reaction in this moment is a part of their bigger story. It's a part of who they've become. It's a part of how their neural pathways were created, whatever trauma they've experienced that caused them to have a thought process that got them to respond in a negative way. And that is something that I hope you can take with you today is to get to a place where with some of those negative relationships that you have with the women in your life, you can look at how they respond to you or look at how they react towards things in the world that bother you and get to a place where you can say, that makes sense. Okay, that makes sense. Because when you get to that place, it really does give you so much freedom. It gives you freedom from the pain of personalizing their behavior and their responses, and honestly, just being irritated by them, because it gives you a little bit of compassion. Compassion and understanding that the way that they are today is a result of everything that they've experienced. And when it comes down to it, that old adage is true where your hate and your negative emotions towards another person hurt you way more than they hurt the other person. Because most of the time, those just become thoughts that are going over again and again in our brains. And like we experienced earlier, it doesn't feel good in our bodies. The other person doesn't really even experience what we're experiencing when we're having negative thoughts about them. They are on their own journey of probably having their own slew of negative thoughts about themselves. They're really not experiencing our negative thoughts. The only person that's experiencing those negative sensations in their body about those negative thoughts is us. And that's what I want you to have freedom from today. I want you to be able to get a little bit closer to neutrality, a little bit closer to that place of understanding where you can say, you know what? That makes sense why they responded that way, and be able to move on to the next thing. So hopefully for you, that gave you a starting place to create that new thought process, that new neural pathway where you can get to a place of freedom, where you're not constantly triggered by their behaviors or their responses, and you can be set free a little bit to move about your life and not be held back by your negative thoughts or feelings about them. I know this is a difficult time of year, not just because of the negative relationships we have with the mothers in our lives or the women in our lives, but also because there are wonderful, wonderful women that maybe we don't have in our lives or have in the way that we want. And so I also want to just send love to you today, that if that's something you're experiencing, I am so sorry. And I'm with you in my thoughts and just sending love your way. I give that as my gift to you today. And I hope you all had a wonderful Mother's Day, and I hope that you're able to move forward with a little bit more freedom. Have a great one, guys. I hope you found something helpful here today on the Love Your Brain podcast. Maybe a laugh or a feeling of validation, or maybe just a few moments to have company while you do your laundry. Whatever you take from it, I hope you enjoyed your time and leave feeling empowered to be more you every day. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on the next episode, and leave a review. I'd love to hear what you think. Have a great one.